Hey there, welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the channel where history gets strange, fragrant and a little bit sticky, but the voice stays calm. Tonight, we're drifting back to the court of Queen Elizabeth I, a place of silk, candlelight, and the gentle hum of decay disguised as glory. You've probably seen the portraits: white face, red hair, lace collar, eyes that look like they've seen both God and the tax returns. But what those portraits don't tell you is how her world smelled. This isn't the story of war or politics, it's the story of air, thick, perfumed and faintly suspicious. A palace where soap was suspicious, water was feared, and perfume did most of the heavy lifting. Because in the 16th century, power didn't just look divine, it smelled divine. Or at least expensive. So before you settle in, take a quiet moment to like this video or subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy falling asleep to humanity's bad decisions wrapped in lace. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling us where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's oddly comforting to know how many of us are awake at the wrong hour, each in our own little pocket of history. Now dim the lights, let a soft fan hum in the background, and imagine walking through a palace so beautiful it almost distracts you from the smell. If your mind drifts, that's perfectly fine. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. You stand in the great hall of Whitehall Palace, England's crown jewel. The marble floors gleam, the tapestries shimmer, and somewhere in the distance a musician politely loses a finger to the cold. It is magnificent and suffocating. The air is thick, like velvet soaked in old perfume and roasted meat. It clings to your throat in a way that makes you wonder if history ever aired the place out. This is what power smells like in the late 1500s, a blend of rosewater, sweat, tallow, and ambition. Every breath carries the faint sweetness of musk, the smoky bitterness of candle wax, and the ghost of yesterday's feast. It is not an air you breathe so much as negotiate with. At court, clean doesn't mean free from dirt. It means presentable, painted, and socially acceptable to stand next to without flinching. Soap is for sailors, not sovereigns. Real royalty keeps its hands soft, its linen scented, and its conscience unwashed. The Queen's advisors write about her radiant purity, which, translated from diplomatic English, means she smelled expensive enough to justify the taxes. Water, meanwhile, is considered treacherous. Doctors warn that bathing opens the pores and invites illness to crawl inside. So instead of washing, people rub, with cloths soaked in vinegar or wine, sometimes even with breadcrumbs. It's like an Elizabethan spa day, except the bread is yesterday's dinner roll, and your esthetician believes in astrology more than hygiene. When the Queen cleanses, it's a performance. Attendants dab her wrists with rosewater, brush her hair with combs carved from ivory, and press perfumed linens to her skin until the air itself smells loyal. It's less about removing dirt, more about staging a miracle. Every towel is a prayer, every scent a political message. If you're a courtier, you learn quickly that perfume is currency. Civet from Africa, musk from deer, ambergris from Wales. All imported, all extravagant. You wear them like invisible medals, proof you can afford the smell of another continent. To reek of the exotic is to be important. To smell merely human is to be unemployed. When Elizabeth walks into a room, she arrives twice. First as a scent, then as a person. Those in her presence describe the air as sweet, a polite Tudor way of saying, overwhelming but mandatory. The Queen herself once declared that good smells are the soul's armour, and she meant it. Fragrance wasn't decoration, it was propaganda. Her perfume wasn't just chosen for beauty, it was chosen for power. The sharpness of musk to assert command, the warmth of rose to appear merciful, and the spice of clove to suggest divine protection. She understood that scent entered before words, and lingered long after diplomacy ended. It was an aura, one that disguised the reality of a world without plumbing, ventilation or reliable soap. Around her, the courtiers follow suit. The men drown their doublets in bergamot oil. The women perfume their hair until the room resembles an apothecary on fire. No one dares mention that all these fragrances are competing, like 50 different saints arguing for sainthood in a single chapel. The smell of holiness, it turns out, is rather loud. But this is a court that thrives on illusion. Every surface is polished to hide decay, every body powdered to deny mortality. And in that denial lies the magic. The queen doesn't need to be clean. She only needs to seem untouchable. The more she avoids water, the more divine she appears. Mortals bathe. Icons simply glow. As evening settles, the candles flare, and the scent of burning tallow joins the chorus. The courtiers fan themselves gently, not from heat, but from survival. Each flicker of light releases a new wave of perfume, a new disguise for the kingdom's favourite secret. Beneath all that silk, everyone stinks the same, but no one dares notice, because to notice would be to admit the truth, that power itself is just a pleasant odour waiting to fade. You take one last breath, half roses, half smoke, and wonder if, centuries from now, someone will remember this world not for its brilliance, but for its smell. You walk through Whitehall, and at first it's impressive. A labyrinth of marble corridors, echoing with footsteps that sound far more confident than the people making them. Yet, as you wander deeper, the air itself begins to feel alive. It hums, it moves, it carries stories that have nowhere else to go. Whitehall doesn't just exist, it breathes, slowly, heavily, like a living creature that has eaten too well and can't quite digest its own magnificence. Inside, the temperature never changes. The great fireplaces glow faintly, yet their warmth can't pierce the chill that seeps from stone. The air is trapped, recycled endlessly, from banquet to prayer to secret meeting. Each breath you take has already passed through a dozen other mouths, been blessed, cursed, or sighed by someone above your pay grade. The smell is impossible to describe, though that won't stop you from trying. There's rosewater and smoke, beeswax and damp wool, sweat that has politely pretended to be musk. Even the wood beams have absorbed centuries of perfume and gossip. When the wind presses against the shutters, a faint sweetness escapes, as if the building itself is trying to exhale the past. In the kitchens below, things are less poetic. The scent of roasting meat climbs the stairwells like ambition, powerful, oily, uninvited. Spices from every empire cling to the ceilings. Cinnamon, clove, pepper, nutmeg, luxuries worth a soldier's wage, now burned into the rafters forever. The servants breathe it in day after day, their lungs quietly becoming part of the recipe. Upstairs, the Queen's chambers are no refuge from this fragrant siege. Everything that glitters has been rubbed with something organic. Furniture polished with tallow, lace stiffened with perfumed starch, tapestries treated with crushed herbs to keep moths and suspicion away. The result is a symphony of scents layered like her politics. Roses on top, vinegar beneath, civet somewhere in between, and a faint undertone of panic. When visitors arrive, the first thing they notice isn't the gold, or the paintings, or even the Queen herself. It's the air, the sense that something invisible but expensive is working very hard on their behalf. They're breathing proof of power. You can almost imagine ambassadors fainting not from awe, but from lack of oxygen. One chronicler described the Queen's presence as a sweetness that commanded devotion, which sounds romantic until you remember that sweetness came from musk extracted from deer, ambergris found inside whales, and civet scraped from the scent glands of small cats that hated everyone involved. Royalty, it seems, always required a little suffering from someone else, and yet to the Elizabethans all this odour meant safety. Their doctors swore that foul air, what they called miasma, carried disease. The cure was simple. Surround yourself with something that smells stronger. If the world stank of rot, drown it in roses. If death had a smell, then perfume was life insurance. So Whitehall became a fortress of fragrance. Every window sealed to keep the bad air out, every corridor lined with herbs to keep it pure. The logic was beautifully circular. You block the wind to trap the perfume, then add more perfume to mask the trapped air. By morning, the air had no idea what it was anymore. The laundresses worked from dawn to dusk, brushing rather than washing. Linen rubbed with vinegar until it squeaked. Gowns smoked over burning rosemary to refresh them. Their hands cracked and red, their eyes watering from the fumes. They were the invisible lungs of the palace, exhaling labour so that the queen could inhale grace. Below the chapel, priests burned incense to sanctify the air for worship. It mixed with the kitchen smoke, the perfume from the royal chambers, and the tallow from 1,000 candles. It drifted through the palace in slow, holy confusion. Some nights you could tell what the queen had eaten simply by sniffing the chapel steps, and yet, in this suffocating cloud, people felt safe. The smell meant civilization, faith, hierarchy, the difference between the queen's world and the one outside. Beyond the palace walls lay the real air, cold, smoky, alive with sewage and disease. But inside, every breath was curated, like a painting you couldn't see but couldn't escape. You pass a window cracked just an inch. The winter wind squeezes through, carrying a hint of the Thames, wet stone, fish, ash, life. It feels raw, honest, and slightly forbidden. One servant quickly closes it again. You're reminded that truth rarely lasts long in polite company. To survive at court, you learn to breathe in layers, one breath for show, shallow, graceful, perfumed, one breath for survival, discreet, stolen near open doors, and one breath you keep inside in case of collapse. Every great palace in history develops a rhythm, and Whitehall's rhythm is olfactory. It breathes in ambition, exhales denial. Each morning begins with a hiss of vinegar cloths and the murmur of prayers. Each night ends with wax smoke curling toward painted ceilings that have already seen too much. If you listen closely, the walls themselves seem to sigh, as if weary of holding up so much illusion. The marble is stained with candle soot. The gold leaf smells faintly of sweat. Yet the servants keep polishing, the perfumers keep mixing, and the queen keeps glowing like a holy relic preserved in civet. Because in this world, scent is faith, perfume is purity, and air, even borrowed, even stale, is proof that something divine once passed through here. You pause near a doorway and realise you can't tell where the queen ends and the palace begins. Her aura has soaked into the walls, the draperies, the people. Power has no boundaries, it simply seeps. Somewhere beyond the tapestry, a door opens. A new wave of perfume rolls down the corridor, as soft as silk and as heavy as gilt. The palace inhales, and so do you. The smell is dizzying, equal parts miracle and mildew. You breathe carefully, politely, as everyone else does. And in that breath, you understand something simple and slightly terrifying. Whitehall doesn't just house the queen, it is the queen. It breathes when she breathes, hides what she hides, and fills the world with the same beautiful, exhausting air. You wake before dawn, when the palace is quiet enough to hear its own heartbeat. Outside, the River Thames moves like a grey serpent under fog. Inside, servants are already at work, rustling through corridors with bundles of linen, vinegar jugs, and something called good intentions. It's bathing day, which in the court of Elizabeth I doesn't mean what you think it means. There is no steaming tub, no bar of soap, no towel that's ever met water. Bathing here is more of a concept, a polite rumour passed down from cleaner generations. What you have instead is linen, endless linen, pressed, perfumed, and rubbed against skin until the illusion of cleanliness reappears. Doctors of the day warn that bathing opens the pores and lets disease sneak in. Water, one physician writes, stirs up ill humours. Another declares it a slow drowning of the soul. So the Queen, naturally cautious, keeps her pores sealed and her faith in friction. The ceremony begins with rosewater, not poured, but dabbed, a few careful drops onto a folded cloth. Then comes vinegar, sometimes wine, and finally dry linen to rub it all away. The attendants move with the devotion of monks, lifting, patting, polishing. It is less hygiene than ritual, a kind of religious scrubbing of regret. The Queen's skin, pale as candlelight, is rubbed until it glows faintly red, not from warmth, but from survival. Her hair is brushed 100 strokes, each pull releasing a faint cloud of perfume and powder that smells of roses, starch, and human endurance. She smiles faintly, the way one does when enduring something they invented themselves. If you're a servant in this routine, you learn that water is not your ally. The laundresses say that washing with water makes clothes weep. Instead, you beat the fabric with sticks, brush it with bundles of lavender, and lay it before a smoky fire to dry. Steam rises, carrying a hint of vinegar and exhaustion. The air smells faintly of ambition gone domestic. Each towel used on the Queen is kept and perfumed again. No one dares throw them away. They are relics now, blessed by contact with the royal skin. When they become too stained to disguise, they are gifted to lesser nobles, who brag that their laundry smells faintly of monarchy. Down the corridor, the lesser courtiers perform their own versions of purification. They rub themselves with linen too, only theirs is coarser, sometimes old tablecloths cut into squares. A good courtier learns how to remove dirt with grace and never with visible effort. You must look fresh, not clean. There's a difference. Freshness means wealth. Cleanliness means labour. There is, of course, an occasional bath. Once or twice a year, perhaps, when the stars align and no one is sick. A wooden tub is brought to the royal chamber, filled with heated water scented with herbs. The Queen sits briefly in it, like a saint reluctantly visiting her own shrine. The bath is perfumed, blessed, and discussed for weeks afterward, mostly because it's the only one anyone remembers. Ordinary people bathe more often, not out of choice, but necessity. The Thames, though filthy, is free. The Queen would never stoop to that. She has rosewater, silk towels, and the luxury of pretending she doesn't perspire. In her world, cleanliness isn't about hygiene, it's about hierarchy. The court physicians write elaborate guides on how to clean without corruption. One recommends wiping the face with breadcrumbs to draw out impurities. Another suggests a paste of crushed almonds and wine. Skincare for those who can afford breakfast and vanity at the same time, and so linen becomes the true symbol of power. It touches what water cannot. It replaces rivers, absolves sweat, and absorbs whatever truth might remain on the body. The Queen's linens are washed not with soap but with fear. Fear of disease, of rumour, of being seen as human. Servants carry baskets of these holy fabrics through the corridors. The sound of them rustling is the palace's morning prayer. Each cloth, still warm from the Queen's skin, is handled with reverence. Some whisper that her scent lingers, rose, civet, and something indefinable, like memory soaked in vinegar. You begin to notice that everyone in the Whitehall moves through the day wrapped in this choreography of linen. The Queen's attendants change her ruffs 3 times a day. Courtiers wear sleeves lined with herbs to purify the air. Even the beds are layered in sheets perfumed with clove and orris root. Still, nothing ever feels clean, only covered. The smell of people, real, mortal people, always waits beneath the lace. Late in the afternoon, a perfumer enters with a new blend of rose and musk. He bows, presenting it as if it were divine revelation. The Queen inhales, nods approvingly, and declares that the air feels lighter now. It doesn't, but no one corrects her. By evening, the ritual begins again. Linens replaced, rosewater reapplied, breath held. You imagine the laundress who will spend the night rinsing the Queen's illusion. Her hands will smell of vinegar and hope. Her eyes will sting from smoke. She will sleep beside the steaming cloths like a guardian of invisible faith. The next morning no one will mention her. They'll simply remark that the Queen glows with cleanliness, as though heaven itself handled her towels. You take a breath and realise the air around you carries the faint metallic tang of vinegar and the floral insistence of rose. It's not unpleasant, but it's not fresh either. It feels like breathing through someone else's dream. And you understand something vital. Cleanliness here isn't about water or purity, it's about narrative. To be royal is to rewrite reality one towel at a time. The Queen never truly bathed, but she didn't need to. History would wash her clean for her. By the time the first light creeps over the river, the Queen's chamber is already awake. Fire crackles in the hearth, candles sputter in protest, and the sound of silk rustling fills the room like a nervous heartbeat. The Queen has not yet spoken, but half a dozen women stand ready, each one holding a piece of fabric, a pot of powder, or a prayer. The ritual of dressing is not about modesty or comfort. It is alchemy, the transformation of a tired, mortal body into the living symbol of England. You, standing quietly by the wall, watch as the first layer begins. Linen thin as breath, brushed with rose oil to seal the body. It clings to her like fog over marble. This is not underwear. This is diplomacy's foundation garment. Over it comes another layer, this one stiffer, perfumed with lavender to discourage moths and flattery alike. A lady-in-waiting kneels to lace her sleeves, her fingers trembling not from devotion but from fear of wrinkling the royal aura. One tug too tight and you could ruin the image of divine composure. And in this court, ruining an image is the closest thing to treason. The Queen speaks little. Her eyes track every motion, calm and precise. You suspect she's cataloguing not just her wardrobe but her courtier's loyalty. To touch the Queen is to risk your career. To dress her correctly is to become part of her myth. Layer by layer she ascends, velvet, brocade, lace and hope. Each piece of fabric smells faintly alive. Musk, starch, dust, something slightly animal. The perfume, once light, now gathers into a visible haze. You could almost reach out and grab it, but you'd likely faint before your hand got there. Her ruff, that famous halo of lace, is carefully fastened at the neck. It's not white by chance. It's been boiled in starch, perfumed with rosewater, then ironed into obedience. When she moves, it rustles softly, a delicate warning that anyone approaching should mind their distance. A portable fence of purity. Her attendants step back in unison. The Queen adjusts a fold of fabric. There is no mirror large enough to contain the full spectacle, but that's fine. The court itself is her reflection. Every person in the room exists to confirm her perfection. The makeup begins next, a slow construction of the divine. A paste of white lead is applied to her face and neck, followed by a dusting of crushed pearls. The powder smells faintly of vinegar, like a ghost pretending to be fresh. When the colour is set, a thin line of red is drawn along her lips. Cinnabar, mercury-based, deadly but fashionable. No one calls it poison, they call it refinement. As the paint dries, the perfumer steps forward with a vial of oil, a blend of ambergris and clove. He dabs it behind her ears, along her wrists, and finally on the folds of her gown. The scent is both delicate and overwhelming, like a candle that doesn't know when to stop burning. She blinks slowly, patient as stone. Her attendants bow and murmur that she looks radiant, divine, eternal, and she does, because this, more than any speech or decree, is how power speaks, not through words, but through surface. Dressing the Queen takes 4 hours on a good day. It is part ceremony, part engineering, and entirely theatre. By the time she's ready to walk out, she's carrying the weight of an entire empire on her shoulders, and about 40 pounds of fabric around her waist. The gowns themselves are feats of architecture. Steel hoops form the base, followed by padded skirts stuffed with horsehair, then multiple layers of embroidered fabric. Every jewel is sewn, every ribbon stiffened with gum arabic, every thread a small declaration of superiority. The gown doesn't move with her. The world simply moves around it. It is easy to forget that beneath all of this she is a person. The weight, the heat, the layers of perfume clinging to her skin like armour. It must be suffocating. But she never shows discomfort. The body that aches or sweats or tires has no place in the kingdom she rules. She stands not as woman, but as symbol, and symbols never wilt. Some courtiers whisper that she rarely eats before appearing in public. An empty stomach, one notes, is a lighter conscience. In truth, eating would disturb the construction. The gowns are too tight. The makeup too fragile. Even breathing is a controlled act, a rhythm learned through years of pretending the human body doesn't exist. The attendants, meanwhile, are exhausted. Their hands tremble from holding their breath too long. Their knees ache from kneeling. But they smile as they work, because the Queen's calm is contagious, or perhaps infectious. You can't quite tell which. When the final piece, a string of pearls, is placed around her neck, the room falls silent. For a moment it feels as though the air itself has bowed. The Queen turns slightly and the light catches her gown. It shimmers like water, the very thing she avoids. Her reflection flickers in the polished metal of a candlestick. What she sees isn't herself, but an empire, a living emblem of control, power and something else. The quiet terror of being seen too clearly. Outside, a bell tolls for morning prayer. The sound drifts through the chamber, muted by all the fabric between heaven and skin. The Queen straightens. Her perfume follows the bell like a second sound. This is what the people will remember. The faint scent of roses, the blinding white of her face, the impossible stillness of someone who has made perfection her profession. They will say she was divine. They won't mention that divinity requires an army of tired women holding their breath in the background. As the door opens, a gust of fresh air enters, or at least what counts as fresh. It smells of frost and chimney smoke. For a brief second, it feels almost real. Then the Queen steps forward, and her perfume erases it. The door closes, and the chamber exhales. Her attendants collapse into quiet motion, folding gowns, wiping brushes, cleaning the battlefield of beauty. The laundress sighs, holding a sleeve that still carries the warmth of Her Majesty's skin. She murmurs that even divinity sweats a little. No one corrects her. You watch as the Queen's silhouette disappears down the corridor, trailing a wake of scent so dense it might as well be silk. The illusion is complete. Outside these walls, peasants are scrubbing their hands raw at the public wells, praying the plague skips their village. Inside, one woman walks through a cloud of roses pretending mortality doesn't exist. And for a while, everyone believes her. By the time the Queen enters the Great Hall, her scent is already there, floating like a royal decree that no one dares question. The courtiers bow and the air bows with them. It's hard to say what you're breathing at this point. Rose, musk, clove, or the faint panic of 1,000 people trying not to sneeze in front of the monarch. This is the air of command. It moves first, speaks first, and makes its own rules. Before the Queen utters a word, her fragrance delivers the message, "I am here, and I am holy enough to smell like it." You stand among the crowd and notice how the air itself seems to organize around her. The closer you get, the heavier it becomes. Not unpleasant, but deliberate, a mixture of sweetness and intimidation. You could almost mistake it for devotion. Every courtier knows the formula by heart, though they'd never dare recite it. A base of civet, oil extracted from a cat-like creature whose personal space has been catastrophically violated. A note of musk from deer, rich and animal. Ambergris, aged and rare, gathered from the insides of whales that have drifted too long on the sea. Each ingredient a small tragedy bottled for glory. And over all of it, the light hand of Rose pretending to be innocent. It's easy to call this perfume luxury, but that would be missing the point. It's not about smelling good, it's about smelling important. Every drop is a declaration of power, the ability to turn the natural world into ornament, to make suffering fragrant. The Queen's perfumer is part artist, part diplomat, and part magician. His hands are stained with oils that would empty lesser treasuries. When he bows, the entire court can smell his rank. And yet, his job is never finished. Perfume fades. Power, unfortunately, must be constantly reapplied. You notice how people lean in when she passes, not out of affection, but out of gravity. Her perfume draws them closer like incense around a flame. The ambassadors who come from abroad carry their own scents. Frankincense from Arabia, bergamot from Italy, myrrh from Venice, yet all of them drown beneath the Queen's cloud. England, it seems, has mastered the art of olfactory conquest. And this is no accident. The Queen knows that scent is memory. It clings to people long after they've left a room, long after words have faded. Her fragrance doesn't just announce her presence, it follows her enemies home. When she greets foreign visitors, they bend to kiss her hand, or more accurately, her glove. The glove, soaked in musk and ambergris, is the real diplomat here. The contact lasts seconds, but the smell lingers for days. Every time they raise their hand to eat, write, or pray, they are reminded of England. It's not politics, it's chemistry with a crown. The courtiers have learned to imitate the Queen's scent, though none dare copy it exactly. Each adds a personal twist, a little extra clove here, a drop of rosemary there, subtle enough to flatter, never to rival. The result is an atmosphere so thick with fragrance that it becomes communal property. By evening, everyone smells vaguely of each other and entirely of exhaustion. In this world, odour is order. The poor smell of work, the rich smell of what work has purchased. A perfumed court is proof of hierarchy. You can't fake the ingredients, not unless you own ships, servants, and the right to make animals die elegantly in your name. One noblewoman sighs, fanning herself discreetly. Her lace cuff brushes her neck, releasing a puff of violet. She's smiling through nausea, the standard expression of admiration in this court. Another gentleman nearby has applied too much musk. The result is ambitious but regrettable. Everyone pretends not to notice. At court, acknowledgement is dangerous. So is deodorant. The Queen sits upon her throne, a seat carved from oak, gilded and perfumed with burning herbs hidden in brass bowls beneath it. The smoke curls around her robes, blending into her perfume, wrapping her in something more than air and less than sanctity. The courtiers call it divine fragrance. The servants call it the reason we cough. As she speaks, the air still dominates the conversation. Her words drift through it like distant bells, carried on currents of clove and civet. The courtiers nod, half listening, half hallucinating. Somewhere near the back of the hall, a musician misses his cue because he's momentarily overcome by the combined weight of theology and whale oil. And yet, somehow, it all works. The scent commands. It fills the room, slows time, keeps everyone on their knees a few seconds longer than necessary. No one remembers the speech afterward, but everyone remembers the smell. And that, in this court, is a kind of victory. When the audience ends, the Queen rises. The air shifts with her, obedient as a well-trained hound. Servants follow, fanning perfumed cloths to maintain the aura. The smell trails behind her through the corridors, marking her passage like incense in a cathedral. By the time she reaches her private chamber, the throne room already feels emptier, lighter, cleaner, a little less alive. You remain for a moment, breathing what's left. The air tastes faintly sweet and metallic, like roses drifting through a forge. You realise you've been holding your breath since she entered. Everyone does. It's the court's quiet superstition. To breathe too close to the Queen's perfume is to risk inhaling divinity uninvited. A servant passes, gathering discarded herbs and refilling incense bowls. He moves like someone performing a sacred duty. "Her Majesty has departed," he whispers, as if the scent itself might hear. You nod, unsure if he's talking about the Queen or the perfume. In this place, the two are interchangeable. Outside, the windows are finally opened. Cold air sweeps in, shocking and ordinary. It smells of rain, horses, the river, all the things that are real. The courtiers retreat from it instinctively, like moths afraid of daylight. You take one last look at the empty throne. The incense still smokes beneath it, stubborn and slow. It's strange, but even in her absence, the air refuses to forget her. You suspect it never will, because in Whitehall, air is loyalty. It remembers what people are paid to forget. And as the perfume fades, something heavier settles in its place. The unmistakable scent of sweat, candle wax, and human life returning. For a brief, unguarded moment, the palace smells like itself again. You breathe it in. It's imperfect, smoky, alive, and somehow it feels more honest than all the roses in England. The wardrobe room is already awake before the Queen is. You can hear it breathing. The sound is soft but constant. The rustle of linen, the sigh of silk, the steady murmur of servants whispering prayers to the gods of fabric and patience. In here, history smells faintly of starch, lavender, and exhaustion. The Queen's clothes are not just clothes, they are declarations stitched by trembling hands. Each gown has its own biography: who made it, who fainted while embroidering it, and which saint was silently invoked to keep the lace from sagging. Every fold is political, every thread is a metaphor for control. And yet none of them have ever been washed. To wash would be to ruin. Water warps the velvet, dulls the silk, and, worst of all, suggests you have skin underneath. Cleanliness in the royal sense means never admitting that the body sweats, so instead they brush, they pat, they perfume, they pretend. Servants line up, armed with horsehair brushes and sachets filled with crushed herbs. They sweep each gown carefully as though exercising it. Lavender, rosemary, mint, the trinity of false cleanliness. A few dried rose petals are tucked into seams. Small linen pouches filled with cloves are hidden in the sleeves. Every dress becomes its own portable garden, a small act of horticultural denial. One servant mutters that she hasn't smelled fresh air in weeks. Another shushes her. Fresh air is for people without status. The Queen's air has already been edited for fragrance. The collars are the worst offenders. Great stiff ruffs starched into obedience, wide enough to stop conversation, perhaps intentionally. They are dipped in a mixture of wheat starch and perfume until they can stand upright on their own, like halos carved from bread dough. The scent is sweet and faintly edible, which would be charming if it didn't also smell like someone baked a meadow by accident. As the laundress works, she explains, not to you, but to herself, that the starch must be just right. Too little, and the lace wilts. Too much, and the wearer can't breathe. Balance, she says softly, is the art of survival. You can't tell if she's talking about collars or monarchy. When the fabric dries by the hearth, the perfume rises with the heat. The air grows thick enough to chew. You taste lavender, dust and something human beneath it. The unmistakable tang of sweat meeting ambition. It's not unpleasant. It's honest. The gowns themselves are heavy things, layers of brocade and fur meant to display wealth but not mobility. You could survive a mild sword fight in one of them, but not a warm afternoon. Underneath, the Queen wears linen that's been rubbed with rose oil and vinegar. It's meant to purify, but mostly it just smells like an expensive salad. The perfumer enters quietly, as he always does. He carries a tray of oils, civet, musk and ambergris. You already know what they are and wish you didn't. He dabs each carefully onto the collars, the sleeves, the hems. His fingers tremble, not from fear, but from years of breathing fumes that would bankrupt a lesser man. He coughs once, discreetly, and says nothing. In his world, perfume and poison have long since shaken hands. When he finishes, the laundress steps back and admires the gowns. They gleam faintly in the dim light, shimmering with pride and deception. Perfect, she whispers. But you can see it, the faint yellowing along the seams, the hidden sweat stains under the embroidery, the places where beauty has begun to rot quietly. These are the Queen's second skin, her confessional booth made of thread. Beneath them, she can pretend to be untouched. She can conduct politics, wage wars, and greet ambassadors, all without ever revealing that she too is mortal. The smell of lavender to her subjects means sanctity. To her servants, it means surrender. The courtiers imitate her, of course. Each tries to out-scent the other. Walking through the palace halls feels like moving through a garden that has declared war on itself. One smells of violets, another of cloves, a third of wet starch and despair. The perfume is so dense that even the portraits on the walls seem slightly intoxicated. Every so often, a maid will open a window for a single breath of fresh air. The act feels rebellious, almost divine. The gust of outside wind rushes in, mixing with the perfume, producing something that smells briefly like truth. Then the window is closed again. Truth doesn't linger long at court. When the Queen arrives, the wardrobe attendants bow until their backs creak. She touches a sleeve here, a ruff there. Her face shows no reaction. Perfection, after all, should look effortless. She orders a new gown to be scented with amber and musk for the ambassador's visit. He favours heavy air, she says simply. It's not gossip, it's strategy. Diplomacy here is not written in ink but in fragrance. As they prepare the chosen gown, a servant burns rosemary in a small brass bowl. Smoke curls upward, catching in the beams. The scent twists through the room, warm and sharp, cleansing nothing but pretending to cleanse everything. You watch as the attendants brush the fabric one last time. Tiny particles of dust rise in the sunlight, turning to gold in the air. For a moment, you can't tell if you're watching people cleaning clothes or people conjuring ghosts, and perhaps that's the truth of this palace. Cleanliness isn't the absence of dirt, it's the presence of denial. When the Queen finally leaves to attend her council, the wardrobe room falls silent. The servants collapse on benches, eyes watering from perfume and fatigue. One of them laughs softly. "We've made her clean again," she says. The others nod, though no one believes it. The gowns hang motionless, their ruffs standing proud and smug. The air is still warm, filled with a sweetness that refuses to fade. You take a step closer and inhale. The smell is strange, floral, smoky, tired. A human story told in lavender and starch. You realise that in this court, fabric doesn't just cover the body, it becomes it. Every thread remembers the person it touched. Every scent remembers what it hid. The wardrobe lies beautifully, but it lies all the same. When the Queen extends her hand, the room forgets its lungs. You watch the gesture hover in candlelight, precise, measured, and already fragranced. The glove is pale, soft, and impossibly clean for something that has touched so many mouths. It is leather taught to behave like silk, and it carries the most obedient scent in England. No one kisses the Queen's skin, they kiss the glove. That is not modesty, it is policy. Skin is mortal, leather can be perfumed. You stand close enough to see the stitching, tiny steps round the fingers, each seam smoothed with oil until it shines like calm water. The glove maker, who has not slept a full night since the coronation, bows in the shadows. His hands tremble. Not from fear, from years of working perfume so strong they count as career hazards. He coughs once, the discreet cough of a craftsman who has inhaled greatness against his will. The recipe for the Queen's glove is a quiet epic. Start with kid leather, as thin as promise. Soak it in a bath of rose and orange blossom. Then warm it gently with a whisper of clove. Later, add what the court calls the animal virtues: musk scraped from deer pouches, civet coaxed from a very unhappy cat, and a few drops of ambergris, that stubborn treasure the sea leaves inside whales as if to confuse future historians. Let time do the rest. Time and a little prayer. The glove comes out smelling like innocence that went to finishing school with sin. It is soft where power needs to be soft and fragrant where policy needs to be remembered. The ritual is simple. A foreign envoy bows. He leans forward, lips to leather. He rises not tasting the Queen, but wearing her. For the rest of the day his beard smells faintly of England. When he lifts a cup, writes a letter, or whispers a secret, the fragrance interrupts like a polite spy. He will forget a sentence, but not this scent. Perfume, unlike memory, does not negotiate. The courtiers know all this. They study the protocol the way sailors study weather. The angle of the hand tells them the temperature of favour. A high wrist, grace. A lower wrist, warning. No wrist at all, pray. But always there is the glove. The soft border between the Queen and the world. The membrane that lets devotion pass and keeps the human out. The glove maker is present today, summoned to deliver a new pair before the ambassador of someplace very certain of itself. He opens a cedar box and reveals gloves so pale they seem uncommitted to existence. He worked the seams with a paste of iris root. He lined the cuffs with slivers of perfumed wool. He has stitched inside, where eyes won't see, a thread dyed with crushed marigold, because someone once said yellow wards off envy, and he is not here to risk outcomes. He clears his throat and explains the blend to the mistress of the robes. He says soft rose, shy clove, a quiet animal depth, in the tone of a man reporting weather in a room that distrusts clouds. He does not say civet or musk aloud. The words themselves feel unwashed. Those ingredients belong to the backstage where truth sleeps in aprons and wakes smelling of paydays. The mistress nods and offers a test. She brushes the edge of a glove along the back of her hand and waits. The scent arrives in stages. First the floral, then the patience of spice, then the long, low hum of expensive animal. She closes her eyes. "It will do," she says, which in this palace is what passes for applause. You notice something else about the gloves. They are never washed. They are rescented. Today's oils rest on yesterday's residue, which rests on last week's breath, which rests on the memory of a treaty that needed forgiveness. The gloves are biographies, written in layers you can't read but you can smell. The polite word is patina. The accurate word is history. A young courtier tries to copy the Queen and wears his own perfumed gloves to supper. His smell arrives 10 seconds before his opinions, which is an improvement. He has overdone the musk, and the result is ambition with antlers. No one tells him. This is a learning court. Mistakes are taught by silence. Later, you follow the Queen through a corridor lined with tapestries. The air is its usual opera of roses and decisions, and the gloves do their work like choir boys. A child peeks from behind a curtain and stares, not at the crown, but at the hand. Of all the royal symbols, orb, sceptre, throne, the glove is the one a child can imagine wearing. That is its power. It is empire at a scale the human can touch. In the chapel, the Queen kneels. Leather meets wood. The scent of cloves stirs as if waking from prayer. The glove maker back in his workshop sharpens a needle and thinks about saints. He knows the saints by smell now. Lavender for patience, rosemary for courage, rose for mercy that occasionally burns. He knows the cost of the Queen's aura in coughs per winter. He tells no one. History rarely tips its craftsmen. Occasionally politics requires drama. If displeased, the Queen will withdraw the offered hand an inch too soon. It is a tiny humiliation, scented and silent. The recipient blinks, unsure what he missed, but goes home smelling of warning. When pleased, she lets the glove linger. Diplomacy can be measured in heartbeats against leather. You catch yourself imagining the glove without the Queen inside it, just the hollow shape of power, still fragrant, still demanding reverence. Would the court bow to an empty glove? Possibly. It would at least consider it. The palace is trained to obey what smells correct. At supper, a platter of candied citrus passes, scattering bright perfume into the close air. Someone mutters that oranges keep away illness. Someone else says nothing because myth is sometimes all the medicine you get. The Queen lifts a sugared slice with gloved fingers. The sugar dust falls like small snow, sweetening authority. Later she dismisses the room with a gesture that ends in leather. The doors open. People spill into corridors, blinking and thoughtful. Behind them, the fragrance remains, folding itself into the draperies the way memory folds itself into sentences. His servant moves quietly to gather the gloves the Queen has discarded. He places them in their cedar box like sleeping animals and carries them away with two hands as if balancing a secret. You linger near the hearth, where the glove maker waits to be dismissed. The fire pops. A spark jumps and dies on the stone. He rubs his chest, steadying his breath. You ask if the perfumes ever make him dizzy. He smiles, a craftsman's weary pride. Only when they work, he says, and they do work. Every handshake today was a rehearsal for tomorrow's allegiance. Every soft press of leather against lip taught the room who it belonged to. Politeness, you realise, was simply a handshake wrapped in perfume. A gust of air slips under the door. It smells of night, damp stone and horses. Tomorrow there will be more gloves, more ceremonies, more people rediscovering the power is easiest to obey when it refuses to smell human. You step into the corridor. A maid hurries past with a basket of hairpieces, their curls shining like captive moons. The scent catches you. Powder, oil, a hint of cinnamon, and you see a candle quiver in the draught. Somewhere ahead, a door opens toward the wig room, and with it, the familiar, thrilling fear that in this palace, beauty is not just heavy, it is also highly flammable. The wig room hums like a beehive disguised as a chapel. Dozens of heads, wooden, silent, and more obedient than the living ones, stare from the shelves. Each carries its own kingdom of curls, loops, and ribbons, trembling faintly in the candlelight. The air is thick with powder, oil, and something metallic, the ghost of scissors long at work. This is where the Queen's hair is born anew each day. Her real hair, pale and thinning from age and the loyal service of lead-based beauty creams, hides beneath a cap. What the world sees, that fiery halo in portraits, is a lie so carefully constructed it deserves its own coronation. A young maid works at the table, combing a strand of reddish gold hair through her fingers. It glints like spun sunlight, though it smells faintly of cinnamon and regret. Each wig is perfumed differently, depending on the occasion. A council meeting calls for authority, cinnamon and violet. A dance requires youth, rose and mint. A funeral demands piety, sage and smoke. Even sorrow here has a fragrance, chart. The wig maker moves silently between tables, his hands stained white with powder. He speaks little, perhaps because words are useless in a place where every hairpiece already has a better vocabulary of vanity. He checks for shine, weight, and the subtle balance between beauty and combustion. For the Queen's wigs, that balance leans dangerously close to fireworks. Flour, oil, and perfume, the holy trinity of early modern hairstyling, combine into something both divine and combustible. The flour gives volume, the oil gives hold, and the perfume covers the smell of both. A fine dust of starch hangs in the air, ready to ignite if a candle wanders too close. The entire room, for all its beauty, is one misplaced match away from sainthood by explosion. You watch as one maid bends too near a candle. The wig maker hisses and snaps his fingers. She freezes. The flame wavers, uncertain, then settles back into obedience. The room exhales. No one laughs. They've all seen what happens when vanity forgets to fear. Still, the work continues. Beauty waits for no accident. The Queen's favourite wig, the phoenix crown, as the servants call it, rests under glass. A forest of auburn curls threaded with tiny jewels that glimmer like patient embers. It smells of rose, clove, and the faint bitterness of burnt sugar. A perfume meant to suggest resurrection. The power to rise again, no matter what has burned before. When the Queen appears, her head is prepared like a stage. The old wig is lifted away with tongs as if removing something sacred, or perhaps unstable. The scalp beneath is pale, powdered, and faintly raw. Attendants wipe it with rosewater and vinegar to refresh the crown. You suspect that the vinegar is less for cleanliness than to remind her she still exists under all this ceremony. The new wig is warmed gently near the hearth before placement. The heat softens the oils, reawakens the perfume, and sends small curls of scented smoke into the air. The Queen sits perfectly still as it's lowered into place. A few pins, a prayer, and the illusion is complete. The hair glows in the candlelight, magnificent and artificial, a sun made by human hands. Around her, courtiers bow, dazzled not just by power, but by the audacity of its maintenance. Every portrait, every speech, every moment of public awe begins here, with a pile of hair that could double as kindling. The perfume of her wigs fills the corridors long after she's gone. Rose and cinnamon cling to the walls like stubborn compliments. Courtiers imitate the style, though with mixed results. One nobleman powders his own hair so heavily that his valet mistakes him for a ghost. Another woman sets her sleeve on fire while adjusting her curls. The court records these small tragedies with the same tone it reserves for weather reports, regrettable but seasonal. And yet no one dares abandon the trend. Hair equals youth, and youth equals legitimacy. A dull head is a dangerous rumour. The Queen's wigs, even as she ages, stay bright, tall, and unapologetically alive. They rise above her like a promise that her reign, like her hair, can outlast time itself. The perfumer makes regular visits to the wig room, carrying bottles of amber and violet. He works quietly, spritzing and brushing, ensuring the wigs stay fresh. You notice that he never lingers too long near the candles. He has learnt his geometry of risk. His cough has worsened, though. Breathing beauty is expensive. Sometimes in the late afternoon, when the palace light softens and the candles have burned too low, the wigs seem to breathe on their own. The curls sway slightly as if remembering the heads they once crowned. You think of them as ghosts, polite ones, perfumed, unwilling to haunt without notice. The Queen, for her part, shows no fear. She wears her wigs as she wears her titles, as though both were effortless. Once, during a reception, a spark from a candle landed on her sleeve. The attendants froze, but the Queen simply lifted her chin and continued speaking until someone smothered it with a napkin. The court praised her composure, No one mentioned the smell of scorched starch that followed her for days. These wigs are more than fashion. They are armour, diplomacy and denial braided together. They hide age, illness, fatigue, and the treacherous truth of being mortal. In portraits they will gleam forever, untouched by smoke or time. You look again at the shelves, at rows of identical curls waiting patiently for their turn at power. The wigs seem almost human in their ambition. Each one wants to be chosen, to feel the weight of the crown resting above it. Perhaps they whisper among themselves at night, debating which of them smells most like destiny. The wig maker locks the room when his work is done. He keeps the key around his neck close to his pulse. Some nights he dreams of fire, a single spark that rises, the Queen's halo blooming into light. He wakes sweating, heart racing, and goes back to work. There is always another wig to scent, another miracle to fake. The next morning you see her again in the council chamber. Her hair glows under the pale winter sun that filters through the windows. The fragrance of rose and cinnamon is faint but persistent, mingling with the smoke of wet logs and the whispers of restless courtiers. She looks eternal, untouchable, almost divine. No one mentions that the divine, in this case, smells faintly of pastry and danger. No one breathes too deeply either. In Whitehall, the line between beauty and catastrophe is just one candle wide. The palace never stops smelling of hope. Hope in this case means rosemary smoke, vinegar steam, and oranges that have travelled farther than most ambassadors. Every breath inside Whitehall is a small act of faith, not in medicine, but in perfume. You live in a time when air itself is suspicious. Doctors say that disease doesn't come from people but from bad smells. The air can carry death like a gossip. The only defence, naturally, is to smell stronger than the problem. It's called the miasma theory, though no one in the palace says that aloud. The word sounds too medical, too honest. Instead, they simply say, unwholesome air. It drifts in from the Thames, through sewers, through the open mouths of the poor. Invisible, democratic, and rude. The cure is fragrance. Always fragrance. Every corridor is armed with pomanders, small metal balls filled with vinegar-soaked sponges, herbs and dried citrus. They hang from belts, glitter from necks, or dangle from rosaries like holy weapons. When the Queen passes, the air clinks with silver and smells like a spice merchant having a nervous breakdown. The perfumer, who now coughs more than he talks, mixes new defences daily. Clove, cinnamon, thyme, sage, each boiled, strained, bottled, and blessed by repetition. He calls them smelling waters. You call them the reason no one can taste dinner anymore. The logic is simple. If foul smells bring disease, then good smells must keep it away. If your neighbour faints from plague, you wave your orange at them in sympathy. If your maid coughs, you throw rosemary on the fire and hope the smoke scolds the germs back to hell. The air becomes a battlefield of optimism. Each morning the laundress sprinkles vinegar in the Queen's chamber. The sharp scent makes her eyes water and her lungs sting, but the Queen swears it refreshes the spirit. The floor glistens faintly, as if holiness has been mopped into it. Doctors recommend burning herbs in the hearth to purify the atmosphere. The list of acceptable smoke reads like a medieval salad. Bay leaves for courage, thyme for the heart, sage for sorrow, rosemary for memory. The smoke swirls through the hallways, combining into a single perfume of confusion. Servants fan the air toward the Queen with peacock feathers. "Breathe it in," they murmur. "It will keep you well." She does. She believes. Or perhaps she simply finds it easier than disbelief. There are small glass bottles on every table, mixtures of vinegar and flowers called sweet spirits. Courtiers raise them to their noses between sentences, as if punctuating each thought with survival. During council meetings, the sound of sniffing is constant, like an orchestra of polite suspicion. One court physician insists that people should keep oranges on their person at all times. The skin releases clean vapours, he explains, that chase away pestilence. Soon the court is filled with nobles clutching fruit as if warding off invisible bees. When the queen holds hers, she looks radiant. When others do, they look ridiculous. But no one says so. Health, like fashion, is contagious. Occasionally a new recipe arrives from abroad. Someone hears of vinegar steeped with juniper berries, or wine boiled with nutmeg and garlic. The palace adopts it instantly. The result is a hall that smells like 10 kitchens arguing with the church. But people feel safer, and that's almost the same thing as being safe. At night the perfume thickens, the fires smoulder, the smoke lingers, and the scent settles on your clothes like invisible armour. You lie awake, breathing it in, thyme, vinegar, rose, clove, and you almost believe it's working. The human mind is remarkably forgiving when fear is polite enough to smell pleasant. The Queen holds audience with her physicians once a week. They bow again, and then they discuss the air. Always the air. How it moves, what it carries, which direction it leans in when plague rumours drift near London. They propose more perfume, more vinegar, more smoke. Their confidence is flawless. Their success rate is not. The laundress, less convinced, mutters that air finds its way through everything. She's right, of course. But in this palace, truth has less rank than fragrance. Once, during a particularly grim summer, when sickness stalked the city, the Queen ordered rosewater fountains to run in every chamber. The marble basins gurgled day and night, perfuming the corridors with sweetness so thick it turned cloying. Courtiers congratulated her on her divine foresight. The perfumer fainted twice. The irony is that the real danger wasn't the air, it was the water. The same fountains that smelled of purity also bred bacteria by the week's end. But no one knew that yet, and perhaps it was for the best. History runs more smoothly on ignorance scented with roses. You notice how every defense against illness here involves transformation. Vinegar becomes sanctified. Smoke becomes prayer. Perfume becomes courage. The Queen's court is less about healing than about performance. A stage where fear is tamed with fragrance and panic is powdered into elegance. The smell of rosemary means survival. The smell of clove means control. The smell of citrus means hope, freshly peeled and slightly desperate. You begin to think that perhaps denial has a fragrance of its own, somewhere between smoke and sincerity. The perfumer brings a new blend to the Queen: amber, thyme, and lemon balm. To clear the mind, he explains hoarsely. She thanks him, though she likely can't smell it anymore. After so many layers of scent, even perfume must fight to exist. As he bows, you see his hands tremble. The oils have eaten the colour from his skin, yet he smiles with the strange pride of someone who serves a purpose larger than comfort. His perfumes are the palace's invisible walls, its soft defence against despair. Outside the palace, London reeks of rain and humanity, but inside the air remains thick, curated, and oddly still. You can almost hear the fragrance working, whispering reassurance, fending off the unknown. You close your eyes. The air is warm, heavy, fragrant enough to dream in. You think, perhaps this is how people survive what they can't understand. They perfume it. And as the Queen retires for the evening, surrounded by her perfumed guardians, the palace exhales another cloud of sweet denial into the night. A gentle, luxurious refusal to admit that fear has a smell of its own. You begin to notice that no one in this palace ever truly washes their hands. They attend to them, they perfume them, they choreograph them. But washing, actual water, actual soap, that would be vulgar. Soap, after all, is for tradesmen, soldiers, and anyone forced to handle the world directly. For the nobility, cleanliness is an idea, not a practice, and ideas conveniently don't stain. Every morning a servant brings a shallow silver basin filled with rosewater and vinegar. It's warm, tinted faintly pink, and smells both sweet and medicinal. The queen dips her fingertips delicately, as if testing whether the water still remembers how to behave. Then she withdraws them, lets an attendant dry them with embroidered linen, and moves on with her day. The ritual takes less than a minute. The illusion lasts all day. The courtiers imitate her. Rows of polished men and powdered women dab at their hands between meals, waving their fingers like miniature saints blessing invisible crowds. The bowls are changed constantly, not because the water is dirty, it barely has time to notice, but because the performance demands freshness. You stand nearby as a servant replaces a basin. The air smells of vinegar and anxiety. The linens used for drying are sent to the laundress, who mutters that she's seen more filth on a glove than in the river. No one listens. She doesn't have perfume, which means she doesn't have authority. At banquets, the etiquette is even more elaborate. Before dining, pages circulate with small ewers of scented water. Each guest receives a few drops poured over their fingers. No one dares ask where the water came from. They simply smile and trust that roses, being noble, can't possibly carry plague. After the meal, the ritual repeats, not for cleanliness, but for ceremony. It marks the end of indulgence and the return to self-control. The queen performs it flawlessly, each gesture small enough to seem divine. Her napkin, stitched with gold thread, bears the faint outline of a handprint that will be studied later like scripture. You begin to realise that hygiene here is a hierarchy. The farther you are from the queen, the more dirt you're allowed to have. Her hands smell of civet and clove. The courtiers smell of diluted versions of the same. The servants smell of vinegar and effort. And the laundress, she smells like everyone's secrets combined. The perfumer once explained that scent purifies. He didn't mean chemically, he meant socially. A perfumed hand was a civilized one, a hand that smelled of labour, even clean water, belonged elsewhere. He coughed when he said it, as if his lungs disagreed. The queen's own. Gloves carry most of the burden. She wears them constantly, even indoors, changing pairs as often as others change moods. They are soaked in oil, powdered with starch, lined with herbs, soft armour for delicate diplomacy. When she removes them, attendants rush forward to catch the air she leaves behind, as though they could bottle authority itself. Sometimes, after public ceremonies, she allows her ladies-in-waiting to refresh her hands with cloths soaked in rosewater and alcohol. They kneel, wiping gently, the way one might clean a sacred relic. The queen watches the motion with quiet detachment. She has learned to see her own body as an instrument, and instruments must be polished, not pondered. The irony is sharp enough to smell. These rituals meant to banish illness often spread it. The same basin passed through multiple hands, the same towel dabbed a dozen fingers, but as long as everything smelled pleasant, no one noticed. Disease in this world isn't invisible, it's just impolite. Once, a visiting ambassador tried to introduce soap as a royal gift. Olive oil and ash moulded into neat white blocks, imported from the Mediterranean. The queen accepted it graciously, then handed it to her physicians. They studied it, debated it, and finally declared it too coarse for noble skin. It was repurposed for cleaning marble floors. The marble gleamed for weeks. The humans did not. Still, some small acts of practicality survive in secret corners. You see the laundress rinsing her own hands at night in a wooden bucket. No perfume, no ceremony. Just water, cold and honest. She dries them on her apron and smiles at the simplicity of it. The palace would not approve, but she sleeps better than anyone upstairs. The queen's hands, meanwhile, remain the most famous in Europe. Pale, steady and perfumed to the point of myth. Painters travel miles to capture them. Poets compare them to moonlight. They are said to heal by touch, though no one can recall a case where that actually happened. When she raises them in a gesture of blessing or command, courtiers watch the light glint off her rings and think, here is cleanliness made visible. They never question what lies beneath the glove, beneath the lotion, beneath the legend. One night, you glimpse her alone, the court dismissed. She sits by the fire, hands bare at last. The skin looks fragile, thin as parchment. A servant kneels beside her, dabbing gently with a linen cloth soaked in rose oil. The Queen's eyes close just for a moment. She looks tired, almost human. The scent of clove drifts through the room, warm, familiar, almost comforting. For that single breath, you understand her. The woman beneath the ritual, the hands beneath the gloves, the person beneath the perfume. Someone who has carried the weight of empire and expectation without ever being allowed to feel dirty or real. Then the moment passes. The gloves return. The fragrance thickens. The Queen becomes an idea again, immaculate, untouchable, perfumed into perfection. Tomorrow, the same basins will appear. The same linens will flutter. The same scent will declare itself holy, and everyone will believe it. Because in this palace, cleanliness has nothing to do with soap. It has everything to do with story. If you smell pure, you are pure. If you perform grace, you are grace. And if your hands never meet water, well, neither does your illusion. Morning begins not with light, but with silence. The kind of silence that belongs to cathedrals and executions. You stand in the Queen's private chamber, watching as the attendants prepare the table. Brushes are laid out like surgical tools. Jars of powders gleam faintly in the half-light. A mirror waits on its stand, polished to an almost moral brightness. This is not makeup, this is architecture. Each day her face must be rebuilt from scratch. The Queen sits, pale and still, her hair hidden beneath linen. Without the paint, she looks almost small, the way a candle does before it's lit. Around her, the air smells of roses, vinegar, and something faintly metallic. The perfumer coughs quietly in the corner. Even he knows when to stay reverent. The first layer is white, the famous whiteness of queens and saints. It comes from Venetian ceruse, a cosmetic made from lead ground so fine it could pass for devotion. The attendants call it the milk of paradise. You call it what it is, powdered arrogance with a death wish. A servant dips a brush into a small bowl of paste. The sound it makes is soft and sticky, like footsteps in snow. She spreads it across the Queen's forehead, then the cheeks, then the neck, smoothing it with slow circular motions. Each stroke erases something, a shadow, a blemish, a sign of being alive. The Queen doesn't flinch. She hasn't in years. The lead burns slightly, but she's learned to interpret pain as polish. Next comes the glaze, a thin mixture of egg white and vinegar. It hardens the paint into armour, sealing the face like porcelain. The Queen sits motionless as it dries. Her attendants fan her gently with folded fans made of peacock feathers, careful not to disturb the mask as it hardens. You can almost hear it set. When she finally opens her eyes, they shimmer behind the white. Distant, almost luminous. You realise that she's not wearing makeup, she's wearing distance. A new pot is opened. Inside is vermilion, a brilliant red made from ground mercury. The powder sparkles in the light, innocent as crushed rubies. An attendant mixes it with oil and applies it to her lips and cheeks. The colour blooms immediately, bright and fatal. She looks alive again, in the same way that painted fruit looks edible. The scent of vinegar and flowers thickens in the room. The Queen breathes slowly through her nose, steady as a statue. You wonder what she smells. If she can smell anything at all through the layers of perfume, starch, and ceremony. Each morning this transformation takes nearly 4 hours. The Queen never complains. Her patience is famous. her stillness legendary. Courtiers say she prays during these sessions, but you suspect she simply detaches, drifts somewhere above her own reflection, where the air is thin and the pain is theoretical. When the white paint dries, the surface becomes slightly cracked. The attendants fix it with powder, gently pressing a mixture of rice flour and crushed pearls onto the face. The result is flawless, at least from a distance. Up close, it's a map of tiny fissures, a country of control slowly fracturing. The final step is scent. A few drops of rose oil brushed along the jawline, a dab of amber on the wrists. The perfume hides the bitterness of the lead, though not entirely. The air tastes faintly of metal. The perfumer coughs again. A court painter stands quietly in the corner sketching. He's not allowed to capture the process, only the result. Still, he watches with fascination. Later, he will paint her as eternal youth itself. He will never mention the ingredients. When the attendants finish, they step back. The Queen opens her eyes again, and the room exhales. She is radiant. She is terrifying. She is the closest thing to divine that cosmetics have ever achieved. The laundress, summoned to clear the table, looks at the jars of powder and mutters under her breath. A face that must be built cannot be trusted. The attendants pretend not to hear. Truth, in this palace, has poor manners. The Queen rises. The new face catches the light like porcelain lit from within. There's no trace of fatigue, no wrinkle, no human softness left. Her own skin hides somewhere underneath, quiet, invisible, enduring. The gown awaits her, a fortress of fabric and perfume. She steps into it slowly, careful not to smudge the masterpiece. The ruff is fastened around her neck, framing her head like a halo built from starch and willpower. The effect is complete. A woman who looks too perfect to bleed. She glances at the mirror. The silence deepens. For a brief moment you think you see hesitation, a flicker of the woman she used to be. Then she lifts her chin, and the hesitation disappears under the authority of ritual. When she walks through the corridor, courtiers lower their eyes. They're not meant to look at her too directly. To do so would be to realize how thin the line is between worship and fear. The air follows her, heavy with rose, mercury, and inevitability. Outside, in portraits, poets will call her the Virgin Queen, pure and untouchable. Inside, in this small, windowless chamber, purity smells faintly of vinegar and fatigue. The perfumer gathers the brushes, places them in a basin, and washes them with trembling care. He avoids looking at the mirror. He knows what it hides. The laundress wipes the table with a cloth that will never come clean. The powder clings to everything, to fingers, to air, to history. You stay behind for a moment, watching the last particles drift in the sunlight. They shimmer gently, almost beautiful, until you remember what they are. Powdered metal pretending to be grace. You think about how every morning begins with destruction, the stripping of yesterday's mask, the rebuilding of today's illusion. You wonder what her skin looks like underneath now, if she even remembers its colour. Somewhere outside, a bell tolls. The day officially begins. The Queen steps into her throne room, face unyielding, light catching on her powdered cheeks. She looks eternal, and she is, at least until nightfall, when the mask begins to crack again. For now, though, she is perfection. A miracle of chemistry softened by perfume, an empire's reputation brushed carefully across her face. Her attendants kneel. The perfumer bows. The court applauds her radiance. No one applauds the lead. By the time the palace wakes fully, the Queen's face is already finished, smooth, luminous, and slightly dangerous to touch. From across the hall she looks immortal. From a few steps away she looks like the reason immortality should come with a health warning. You stand close enough to see it, the faint cracking at the corners of her mouth, the powder settling into lines that didn't exist yesterday. The attendants pretend not to notice. Their job is to maintain the illusion, not the person underneath. The truth is simple and cruel. The mask that makes her divine is slowly killing her. The lead paste she wears daily seeps through the skin. It doesn't just whiten, it corrodes. Small sores appear along the jaw, red and tender. The cure, ironically, is more lead. When the skin breaks, the attendants apply a thicker layer the next morning, smoothing pain into invisibility. The white covers everything: colour, fatigue, infection, as though denial itself could be powdered and sold by the ounce. Her lips, painted with vermilion made from ground mercury, burn constantly. She no longer feels it unless she forgets to smile, and then the pain returns, bright and sharp. Once, when she tried to eat a slice of sugared orange, her lip cracked and bled into the sweetness. She swallowed the taste of iron and continued her meal without a word. The courtiers called it grace. The physicians know, though they don't say it aloud. To treat her skin would mean acknowledging its damage, and no one wants to be the first to suggest the queen is mortal. They bring her ointments of almond oil and beeswax mixed with more lead. Each new layer heals nothing and hides everything. At night, the attendants scrape off the day's work. It comes away in flakes, leaving patches of raw skin behind. A battlefield where vanity and chemistry have fought to a draw. The queen sits quietly during the process, a towel around her shoulders, her eyes closed. She winces sometimes, but only slightly. She's learned that pain is less noticeable when performed elegantly. The laundress, summoned to wash the cloths, watches the residue dissolve in a basin of wine and rosewater. The liquid turns faintly grey. "That's not makeup," she mutters. "That's the crown melting." No one answers her. The attendants keep working, dipping brushes into jars, whispering prayers to saints who probably smell of lavender by now. When the mask is gone, the queen's true face emerges, pale, mottled, freckled with tiny burns. It is not ugly exactly, but it is fragile, unfinished, like a painting left out in the rain. In the soft candlelight, you can see how hard she's been pretending to be perfect. The illusion has seeped so deep it may never leave. Still, the next morning the process begins again. There is always a visitor, a ceremony, a portrait waiting to be painted. The face must return to duty. The mask must rise again. One evening, after a long council session, you find her sitting by the hearth, her cheek resting against her hand. She looks exhausted. A servant approaches to reapply a bit of powder before supper. The queen waves her away. "Let it fade," she says quietly. "They will not recognize me anyway." For a moment, she touches her own skin, lightly, as if testing whether it still belongs to her. The fingers come away pale from powder dust. She stares at them, frowns, then wipes them on her gown. Even fatigue must look elegant here. The perfumer visits, bringing a new salve. It smells of honey and clove, sweet and medicinal. "To soothe the irritation," he says, bowing. She thanks him, though she already knows it will only replace one pain with another. Still, she accepts it. Habit is stronger than hope. When he leaves, she sits in silence. The firelight flickers against her face, reflecting off the cracks in the paint. The light makes them look like veins of gold in marble. Beautiful, deliberate, holy. You almost forget their wounds. That's the magic of artifice. Suffering becomes aesthetic if you frame it correctly. The courtiers continue to adore her, of course. They write poems about her beauty, about her purity, about how the sun itself grows shy in her presence. None of them mention that the sun burns less than her cosmetics. They mistake endurance for divinity, and she allows it. In this world, pain is proof of purpose. At banquets, when the heat rises, beads of sweat form beneath the makeup. The powder cakes slightly. Attendants discreetly blot it with perfumed cloths. The queen never wipes her own face. That would be too human. She sits unmoving. the air around her shimmering faintly with the smell of roses and metal. Later, when the hall is empty, servants will scrub the chairs where she sat, scraping away the faint white traces left behind. The palace collects her skin like relics. Even decay is sacred when it comes from power. One night, the laundress catches you staring at a discarded handkerchief, its edge stained pink from lead and blood. She shakes her head. "Beauty is a slow poison," she says softly. "But then so is love, and we keep drinking both." You laugh quietly, but she doesn't. She just folds the cloth and tosses it into the fire. The smoke that rises smells sweet. It's strange, you think, how suffering here is always scented, how even pain must behave politely. The Queen's agony arrives in rosewater and leaves in smoke. Her smile remains steady, her perfume unchanged. The courtiers smell devotion, only she knows its endurance. As she steps into her chamber that night, attendants trailing behind her, the air carries that same soft blend of beauty and exhaustion. The mask glows under the candlelight, flawless from afar, trembling up close. Her face can survive anything except honesty. The Queen's smile is famous. Painters immortalize it, poets worship it, and courtiers swear it could stop storms. Which, to be fair, it often does, mostly because people stop breathing when she aims it in their direction. But what they never mention is that the smile hurts. It isn't a metaphorical hurt, the kind poets like. It's literal, the kind that starts deep in the gums and radiates up the jaw like a quiet rebellion. Each tooth, once a pearl of youth, now aches with the memory of sugar. Because sweetness, in this court, is more than a taste. It's a declaration of wealth. Sugar is the most expensive vice in the 16th century. It arrives by ship from faraway colonies, carried across oceans by men who will never afford a single spoonful of it. At Whitehall, it flows like snow at Christmas, powdered, sculpted, and poured into everything. The Queen loves it. Her physicians encourage it. Her teeth, tragically, do not. Every banquet begins with sugared fruit, candied petals, and marzipan swans. Even the meat glitters with sweet glaze, as though flavour alone weren't decadent enough. Guests marvel. Poets write verses about the divine taste of empire. The Queen smiles, gracious and radiant, though she knows that every bite brings her closer to pain. Her teeth begin to darken one by one. The white lead on her face can hide many sins, but not the black behind her lips. So she smiles less often in daylight. At night, by candlelight, the illusion holds. Gold flickers, faces blur, and the smile glows just long enough for worship. Soon the courtiers begin to imitate her, as they always do. What was once embarrassment becomes fashion. They darken their own teeth with soot and burnt clove oil to appear more royal. Her Majesty's hue, they call it. The Queen's dentist, a man whose courage borders on delusion, writes in his notes, "The court now smiles in solidarity and in need of stronger breath. To mask the odour of decay, everyone chews spices, clove, cinnamon, mint leaves dipped in wine. The Queen favours something more refined, tiny balls of honey and herbs called breath pearls. They dissolve slowly, on the tongue, releasing sweetness and denial in equal measure. The perfumer claims they are his finest invention. The physicians quietly call them a truce between appetite and consequence. Each morning before her mask of lead and mercury is applied, the Queen rinses her mouth with vinegar and Creoche sage. It helps little. The pain lingers. At night, she presses a cloth soaked in rose oil to her jaw and waits for the ache to dull. When it doesn't, she drinks spiced wine laced with opium. The world softens, so does she. The attendants whisper that she dreams aloud when she's dosed. They hear her murmur strange things. Fragments of speeches, lost names, promises to ghosts. The next morning, she remembers nothing except that her smile must still work. One day, a courtier makes the mistake of commenting on her pallor. "You seem unwell, Majesty," he says. She turns to him slowly, her lips curving just enough to show the dark gleam of her teeth. The man pales faster than she does. No one ever mentions her health again. There's power in that smile. Even broken, it commands. It reminds everyone that beauty, like authority, doesn't need to be genuine. It only needs to be convincing. The perfumer begins experimenting with new ways to help her taste divine. He mixes tinctures of mint and amber, oils of myrrh, even powdered pearls. Each promises freshness, none deliver it. The mouth, he sighs, is an honest creature. He coughs again as if to prove it. At feasts, musicians play while servers carry platters of candied fruit carved into crowns and castles. The queen watches without eating much. Her appetite has dulled. When she does take a bite, she chews carefully, smiling through pain. The courtiers applaud her refinement, unaware that they are applauding endurance. After supper, attendants bring her a cup of warm wine infused with clove. She swishes it, spits delicately into a napkin and smiles again. The court physician nods approvingly. "Majesty looks restored," he says. She doesn't answer. Restoration here is always temporary. The laundress, summoned to wash the napkins later, finds faint traces of blood among the rose petals. She sighs and whispers a prayer to no one in particular. Then she folds the cloths neatly, as if to preserve the dignity of pain. In portraits painted that year, the Queen's smile softens. It becomes symbolic rather than literal. A calm curve, closed lips, confidence without exposure. The artists know better than to depict truth. They paint light instead, and everyone calls it holiness. You see her again the next morning, seated by the window as sunlight filters through the glass. Her face gleams, her gown shines, and her lips remain gently pressed together, serene, untouchable. Only her eyes betray her. They hold the faint shimmer of someone who's learned that every luxury is a loan, and every sweetness will eventually demand repayment. The perfumer, ever faithful, presents her with a new breath elixir. He promises it will ease the pain. She takes it, tastes the syrup of mint and honey, and smiles for him. The small, patient smile of someone too polite to hope. Later, she leans toward the fire, letting the warmth reach her face. The light flickers across her closed mouth, catching on the fine cracks in the paint. You can almost hear the whisper between the flames and her perfume, a secret alliance between beauty and decay. And still she smiles, because that's what's left. Her smile is the last thing she controls. The face beneath it belongs to the mask, the hair to the wig, the air to the perfume, but the smile, even broken, even bleeding, that's hers. The court continues to adore it. The poets continue to rhyme about it. And history, generous as ever, forgets the rest. There are thrones you see in paintings, and then there are thrones that never make it into history books. The first kind is carved from oak, gilded, elevated, a monument to majesty. The second kind is smaller, humbler, and far more honest about the business of ruling. This is the Queen's close stool, her private toilet, disguised as a piece of furniture, upholstered in velvet, perfumed within an inch of its life. It sits behind a heavy curtain in a small adjoining chamber, attended by servants of unshakable discretion. If power has a scent, this is where it takes a breath. You imagine the scene each morning, the chamber quiet, lit by candles that work too hard, a single chair with a removable lid, a bowl of scented water nearby, a servant kneeling, armed with linen and patience. It is easy to forget that even queens must sit. In a world obsessed with appearances, here is the one moment when the body reminds the crown who's in charge. The air in this little room smells of roses, musk, and the faint undertone of what the perfumes are trying to forget. Lavender sachets hang from the walls. Herbs smoulder in a brazier to purify the air. The result is a smell that could pass for piety if you stand far enough away. The Queen enters quietly, alone except for her attendants. They call this the privy chamber, though privacy is relative. The women who serve her here are chosen for loyalty, not conversation. They move with reverent precision, treating this daily necessity as ritual, not relief. She sits, and for a moment, everything stops. No audience, no courtiers, no performance. Only the quiet truth that everyone, even monarchs, answers the same call. It's a strangely democratic sound, muffled by velvet and denial. The attendants pretend not to hear. They are trained in selective deafness. Instead, they focus on practicalities, sprinkling rose petals into the basin, replacing the linen cloth, refilling the vinegar water. Every motion is an act of devotion to the myth of perfection. Once finished, the waste is whisked away through a secret corridor to servants below, who will later carry it outside to the river. It's hard not to notice the symbolism. England's greatness, flowing quietly into the Thames. The palace itself is a delicate balance between beauty above and rot below. Pipes made of wood and lead snake through the walls, creaking and leaking. In summer, the smell creeps upward, faint but insistent. Courtiers burn incense and pretend not to notice. It's said that when the Queen travels, locals rush to prepare her lodgings not with tapestries or jewels, but with fresh rushes on the floors and perfumed basins, the royal equivalent of disaster prevention. Despite all precautions, there are accidents. One record mentions a visiting noble who tripped over a chamber pot during a council meeting. No one laughed, at least not audibly. Decorum demands silence, even when history loses its footing. To ease the strain of royal dignity, her physicians recommend diet adjustments, less meat, more figs, the occasional infusion of warm milk with honey. The Queen endures the advice, but rarely follows it. Appetite, like power, is a difficult habit to moderate. You think about how strange it must be to live so perfectly controlled that even your most private acts require choreography. The attendants will later write, in careful court language, that Her Majesty was well relieved this morning. The line appears in household records beside expenses for velvet, perfume and candle wax. Bureaucracy, it seems, can survive anything. The stool itself is an object of craftsmanship. The seat is padded with velvet, the lid carved with roses, the bowl polished pewter. A small compartment underneath holds perfumed vinegar. When lifted, it releases a faint scent of cleanliness, or at least ambition. The Queen's monogram is stitched into the cushion. If humility is a virtue, hers has exquisite upholstery. There's something oddly moving about this hidden throne. Here, away from the echoing halls and painted portraits, she is simply a body again, tired, breathing, fragile. Her crown rests on a nearby stand, watching like an indulgent chaperone. The laundress, when summoned, carries away the soiled linens, without comment. She has long stopped believing in perfection. All flesh humbles itself eventually, she mutters to the perfumer, who nods as if he's just been told a trade secret. Sometimes the Queen reads letters here, dispatches from abroad, petitions from courtiers, while an attendant burns sage nearby. The smoke curls lazily, blurring the line between necessity and meditation. She signs a few documents when she's finished, because efficiency is next to godliness. And yet, despite the luxury, the space feels oddly human. The perfumes can only do so much. The truth always lingers. This is the closest she ever comes to being herself. A mortal among miracles. A woman in velvet, breathing through roses and regret. In this small chamber, you realize the irony of empire. The most powerful woman in the world must hide the most ordinary part of herself. The palace outside may dazzle with gold and ceremony, but beneath it all runs the same current every household knows, a reminder that power, no matter how perfumed, still flushes. By afternoon, the room is cleaned, the linens replaced, the incense renewed. The air smells pure again, deceptively so. Visitors pass the door without knowing that history's most fragrant throne sits just beyond it. That evening, as the Queen takes her place on her public throne, surrounded by courtiers and light, no one imagines the other seat, the one that makes this performance possible. The scent of roses fills the hall. It is the same scent that hides downstairs. And somewhere below, the servants empty the basin into the dark water, watching the ripples spread. They don't speak. They've long learned that silence is the truest form of loyalty. If someone were to ask what power smells like, you could answer truthfully, it smells like roses trying to forget what they're covering. The first thing you notice about a royal banquet isn't the food, it's the air. Before the guests arrive, the servants light candles scented with rosemary and rose. Musicians tune their lutes. The cooks shout over the sound of boiling sugar and crackling fat. The perfume of the court, already heavy, deepens into something edible. A mingling of meat, flowers, and the faint anxiety of overcooked diplomacy. This is not dinner. This is theatre with utensils. The tables stretch endlessly, draped in linen so white it glows under candlelight. Dishes shimmer like jewellery, not meant to be eaten so much as admired. Swans are roasted and redressed in their own feathers. Pies hide sculpted sugar castles beneath their crusts. Even the bread smells faintly of rosewater, as if afraid to be ordinary. And everywhere, there is scent. Before the first course, servants sweep through the hall with silver censers, trailing clouds of burning herbs, thyme, clove, bay leaf, to cleanse the air. The courtiers inhale reverently, pretending not to cough. Behind them follows another servant carrying a bowl of vinegar and citrus peel, in case holiness needs a backup plan. The Queen enters last, a slow-moving constellation of perfume. Her gown gleams. Her face glows under its armour of lead and roses. Wherever she walks, the air straightens its posture. Guests bow deeply, breathing her in like incense. Once seated, she gestures for the feast to begin. Platters arrive in procession. Roast boar glazed with honey and cinnamon, quail stuffed with violets, jellies moulded into flowers. Each dish is both weapon and message. To dine here is to read between flavours. To survive here is to pretend you don't notice. The courtiers begin eating delicately, using their fingers. Forks are still suspiciously foreign, and wiping them on perfumed cloths between bites. The napkins are soaked in orange blossom water, leaving hands sticky but divinely fragrant. Etiquette demands that everyone look graceful, even while juggling half a pheasant and a prayer for digestion. The perfumes in the room begin to layer like political alliances. Clove smoke mingles with rose, wine competes with musk, and somewhere underneath it all the smell of tallow and heat quietly reminds everyone that reality still exists. To the untrained nose, it's chaos. To the Elizabethan court, it's harmony, the olfactory equivalent of diplomacy. Every scent has purpose. The burning herbs at the centre of the table signal virtue. The perfumed sugar sculptures whisper wealth. The Queen's own fragrance, a careful blend of ambergris, civet and clove, dominates all, reminding the room that even conversation must pass through her scent before reaching the air. Foreign ambassadors take notes behind polite smiles. They know that a court smell is a language. France smells of jasmine, Spain of incense, Venice of salt and spice. England, under Elizabeth, smells like restraint dipped in roses, pure on the surface, complicated underneath. During one particularly tense dinner, the Queen orders the servers to pour rosewater over the marble floors for refreshment. The scent rises, filling the hall with a dizzying sweetness that almost drowns out the tension. The Spanish ambassador sneezes discreetly into his sleeve, The Queen smiles faintly. That too is diplomacy. Each banquet becomes a negotiation by scent. Sweet dishes are served before bitter ones to set the mood. Citrus follows meat to cleanse the air and the conscience. Guests gifted with perfumed gloves or handkerchiefs know they've been favoured. Those who leave smelling only of smoke understand their status perfectly. Even the wine is scented, mulled with cloves, nutmeg and cinnamon. It steams softly in its goblets, tasting of empire. The spices, rare and expensive, remind everyone present that the world is large and England's reach is growing. The courtiers drink it reverently, pretending not to notice that it stains their teeth purple beneath the powder. The Queen eats little. She never needs to. The feast isn't for her hunger, it's for her legend. She picks at sugared almonds, occasionally tasting a slice of perfumed jelly. The courtiers murmur admiration for her restraint, unaware that her jaw aches from the sweetness she's already endured. Between courses, servants sprinkle crushed herbs onto the fire to brighten the air. The resulting smoke weaves through the hall like a sermon on sensory faith. For a few moments the room smells pure again, or at least less ambitious. Then the next dish arrives, and the air surrenders once more. You glance toward the ceiling and notice the candle smoke forming faint clouds, each scented with whatever optimism the kitchen produced that night. The walls, soaked with centuries of aroma, breathe it back like memory. Somewhere near the back, a servant fans the air toward the guests with a bundle of peacock feathers, moving history one whiff at a time. When the final course arrives, candied rose petals and marzipan towers, the Queen signals for silence. A musician plays softly, his notes trembling through the sweet, heavy air. The Queen raises her goblet, the gold catching firelight. "To peace," she says. The hall echoes her, though everyone tastes politics in the word. Afterward, guests disperse through the corridors, leaving trails of perfume that mix and linger like the afterglow of flattery. Servants hurry to scrub the tables, sweep the rushes, and open the windows. The cold night air rushes in, honest, unscented, disapproving. It smells of the Thames, of wet stone, of everything perfume can't fix. The Queen lingers a moment longer, still seated at the head of the empty table. She inhales the fading sweetness, then exhales slowly. Her perfume, as always, wins. She knows what scent can do. It can command, confuse, or comfort. But it can't cleanse. Not really. No matter how sweet the air, something always rots beneath it. The candles sputter one by one. The last sound is the quiet hiss of clove smoke meeting cold air, a tiny treaty between illusion and truth. By dawn, the hall will smell of nothing but wax and wood again, and the palace, as always, will begin perfuming its next performance. By the time you've walked the length of Whitehall twice, you start to realise that something underneath it is breathing. Not the kind of breathing the living do, but a slow, damp exhalation that smells faintly of everything people have tried to forget. The palace is grand above ground, marble, gold, velvet, rosewater, but below it the air changes. It grows warmer, thicker, more human. Servants call it the underhall, though they rarely say the name aloud. It is where perfume goes to die. You follow a corridor that dips lower than it should. The floor slopes gently, the light fades, and the air takes on the tired sweetness of rotting wood. Somewhere in the dark, water drips, rhythmically patient like time rehearsing its lines. This is where the waste goes, the forgotten, the discarded, the things that don't fit inside a portrait. Beneath the rosewater fountains and velvet thrones runs a hidden city of drains, cesspits and tunnels. They creak when the wind changes. Servants whisper that they can hear the palace groan at night, as though it's tired of pretending to be clean. Every few months, a report reaches the steward. Unpleasant airs rising through the floorboards. He orders more herbs to be burned, more vinegar sprinkled, more prayers said. It helps for a day or two, until the smell remembers where it came from. Even the drains, it seems, are loyal. They refuse to move. The laundress knows this world better than most. She walks the back stairs with her basket of linens, following the scent of vinegar and damp stone. The palace. Leaks truth, she mutters. Same as everything else. Her shoes leave faint prints in the dust. The quiet footprints of a woman who keeps the kingdom from collapsing by washing its lies one cloth at a time. Down here, the perfumes fade and the real world begins. The air taste of iron and mildew. The faint trickle of sewage beneath the floor sounds like the murmur of forgotten courtiers, still gossiping after death. Rats scurry along the edges, more honest than anyone upstairs. They don't bother to hide. They've learned that even royalty can't outstink a drain forever. A small door opens into the cellar, where barrels of vinegar and rosewater are stored. The scents mingle into something indecisive, half sweetness, half warning. The perfumer used to come here to mix his ingredients. Now his bottles gather dust, their labels fading. He coughs less these days only because he rarely visits. The air has claimed him too. The foundations of Whitehall were never meant for eternity. The river creeps closer every year, flooding the lower passages, staining the walls. The servants bail water in silence, pretending it's just another duty. The Queen rules by grace, they say, but the Thames rules by gravity. Sometimes during banquets, the smell drifts upward. Guests glance around politely, pretending it's incense. No one ever mentions it to the Queen. The illusion depends on her not knowing, or at least pretending not to. Power, like perfume, works best when applied selectively. In winter, the problem worsens. Fires burn day and night, their smoke mixing with the damp air rising from below. The result is a fragrance the perfumer calls earthly persistence. Everyone else calls it Tuesday. You find a small crack in the wall where light seeps through from the kitchens. The cooks above are arguing about spices, tossing cloves into boiling pots. Their laughter filters down, muffled by stone, and blends with the slow drip of water below. It's oddly comforting. The sound of life layered over decay, refusing to notice it. The Queen never comes down here, of course. She doesn't need to. But sometimes, standing in her private chapel, she feels the floor tremble slightly beneath her feet. She believes it's the echo of music from the next room. It isn't. It's the pipes shifting under the weight of centuries, sighing with every sermon. One servant claims that at night you can hear the drains whispering. It's the air trying to leave, he says. The others laugh, but not too loudly. Everyone in Whitehall believes in something. Saints, miracles, or good ventilation. You imagine the perfumes above, the rosewater baths and scented gloves, fighting a hopeless war against the slow, inevitable rise of what lies below. The palace is a body, its lungs perfumed, its stomach ignored. It eats luxury and digests denial. In the candlelight, a puddle reflects the ceiling's faint shimmer. You can see the outline of the beams, the movement of servants' feet above distorted by the ripple. It looks almost beautiful, a royal reflection in dirty water. You think, perhaps this is what history really is, the elegant surface trembling over the mess beneath. The laundress passes you on her way back up. Her arms are full of damp linens that smell of vinegar and defeat. They'll never know, she says softly. They think clean means bright. Then she disappears into the staircase, swallowed by the flicker of her candle. You stay a while longer, listening to the rhythm of water, the faint crackle of firewood, the quiet patience of things that rot without apology. Somewhere above, a new batch of perfume is being mixed. Somewhere below, the old one is seeping into the earth. It's strange, for a palace built on faith and fragrance, Whitehall smells most honest where it's least seen. Eventually you climb the stairs again. The air grows lighter, sweeter, more artificial. By the time you reach the Queen's chamber, the world below feels like half-remembered confession. Candles flicker. Perfumed cloths hang from the walls, and the illusion of cleanliness has returned, perfect as ever. You take one last breath. The roses are winning again, at least for now. But deep beneath your feet, the river is still moving, slow, dark, and patient. There are kinds of devotion that burn quietly, and then there are kinds that take the curtains with them. By the final years of Elizabeth's reign, imitation had become a national sport. Every courtier wanted to look, walk, smell, and even cough like the Queen. Her mannerisms were rehearsed like scripture, her perfume copied like a trade secret, and her style of speech, a soft, measured patience just this side of menace, could be heard echoing through corridors like a hymn sung off-key. But devotion, when mixed with oil, powder and candlelight, has a habit of turning dramatic. Whitehall, already drenched in perfume and optimism, had quietly become a fire hazard in lace. Every gown was stiffened with perfume starch, every wig powdered with flour and scented oil. The air was rich enough to ignite from a strong opinion. The servants knew it, the perfumer knew it, the Queen knew it, and ignored it, because royalty doesn't retreat from flammability, it turns it into style. The first instant was almost graceful. A lady-in-waiting adjusting her ruff too close to a candle created a brief halo of light that would have impressed most saints. The smell of singed lavender filled the room. She fainted, was revived with vinegar, and thanked everyone for their loyalty. The Queen, amused, called it a lesson in enthusiasm. After that, rumours spread faster than the flames ever did. Courtiers began to whisper that the Queen's presence alone was electrical. It was easier to call it magic than to admit that her perfumes were mostly whale oil, civet musk and alcohol, substances that could light an empire and also, unfortunately, a sleeve. Soon the accidents multiplied. A gentleman poet trying to impress a visiting envoy leaned too close to a torch while bowing. His beard, well greased and fragranced, went up with poetic efficiency. He spent the rest of the season writing odes to humility. Another noblewoman lost half her wig during a dance. The flames extinguished only when another guest threw his wine over her, a rare moment when drunkenness saved dignity. The laundress, watching these events from a safe distance, muttered to the perfumer, "If the plague doesn't take us, the perfume will." He coughed in agreement, which at this point was his native language. The Queen herself remained untouched, as if the flames recognised their superior. She moved through the haze of candlelight serene as ever, her gowns trailing a scent that combined danger with divinity. People said she glowed, which technically she did. To her, imitation was flattery, combustion was an occupational risk. When a frightened lady once begged to replace candles with lanterns, Elizabeth replied calmly, "The light of England needs no glass." The attendants nodded and quietly stocked more vinegar. The irony is that the same perfumes that fueled these accidents were also the court's greatest weapon of diplomacy. The Queen's scent was legend, a blend of musk, amber, rose and clove. To smell like her was to borrow her power. To fail was to risk invisibility. The line between reverence and self-immolation blurred daily. One evening, during a private mask performance, the line disappeared entirely. The dancers, dressed in silk sprayed with rose oil, twirled near the torches. The Queen smiled, enjoying the spectacle of controlled grace. Then one torch flickered too low. A spark met a skirt. A whisper met a gasp. And within seconds the stage resembled divine judgment. The Queen did not panic. She simply raised her hand, commanding calm, while servants rushed with blankets. The flames were smothered, the dancers saved, and the audience applauded, because in this palace, even disaster must exit gracefully. The next day, poets called it the fiery mask of love. No one mentioned the smell of burnt rose lingering for a week. The perfumer, horrified, proposed new, less flammable recipes. The Queen listened politely, then refused. "If beauty fears fire," she said, "it was never beauty at all." He bowed and went home to write his will. By now, the palace had grown weary of its own reflection. Every surface gleamed, every corridor shimmered with powder. The air itself felt tense, ready to ignite with a sigh. People began to move slower, speak softer, breathe shallower, as though afraid their lungs might strike a spark. It wasn't only the perfumes, it was the atmosphere, the emotional oxygen of a court that had spent decades pretending perfection didn't require fuel. Every compliment, every performance, every smile was another candle burning a little too close to silk. Even the Queen, for all her composure, began to feel the weight of imitation. Everyone wanted to mirror her, but mirrors, she once remarked, are merely glass begging to break. She wasn't wrong. Beneath the fragrance, the flattery and the fabric, a fatigue had settled. Quiet, invisible, flammable. Sometimes late at night, a servant would pass through the corridors and catch a whiff of something faintly burnt. Not smoke, but the ghost of it. They would stop, listen, then move on. The palace, like its queen, had learned to hide its scorch marks beneath perfume. Still, the accidents never truly stopped. A glove, a cuff, a hem, little bursts of human reminder. The laundress kept vinegar near her wash bucket now. Just in case ambition misbehaves, she said. The perfumer began storing his oils in clay jars instead of glass. When asked why, he simply replied, "I prefer my art not to explode." And through it all, the Queen remained untouched, yet surrounded by devotion that smoked gently at the edges. They burned for her, sometimes literally. It was both loyalty and warning. The air in Whitehall carried a new tension, as if the palace itself knew that beauty, when pushed too far, always seeks a way to destroy itself. And somewhere beneath the scent of roses, musk and scorched silk, you could almost smell the next chapter of history, something colder, quieter, and ready to begin. At night, the palace quiets, but it never truly sleeps. The torches dim, the perfume fades to a whisper, and the air grows heavy, a stillness so complete that you can almost hear the walls remembering. Somewhere down the hall, a mouse scurries, a clock ticks, a candle sighs into exhaustion. The empire of fragrance rests, only its ruler remains awake. Elizabeth cannot sleep. The same sharp mind that commands armies and diplomats refuses to surrender to dreams. She lies in her bed beneath velvet canopies perfumed with rose and myrrh, eyes open, pulse slow but stubborn. The air tastes of incense and night sweat, the scent of grandeur turning human. Doctors have prescribed everything. Wine steeped with poppy syrup to soothe the spirits, sweet pastilles of sugar and herbs to quiet the nerves, infusions of warm milk scented with nutmeg. And when none of that works, a few drops of opium dissolved in wine, the closest thing to mercy her century can offer. The Queen takes them sparingly, though sparingly depends on the night. Some evenings she drinks just enough to blur the edges of her thoughts. Other times, when the ache behind her eyes refuses to fade, she drinks until memory itself begins to hum. The attendants call it rest. The physicians call it balance. You, standing quietly in the corner, know it for what it is. Surrender disguised as routine. The chamber smells like a slow storm of narcotics. Spiced wine, poppies, and faint. Traces of rosewater clinging to the sheets. The blend is almost holy, a prayer meant to be inhaled. It fills her lungs, steadies her, and carries her halfway to sleep. But halfway isn't enough. When the drugs settle in, her body drifts, but her mind keeps working, counting victories, weighing betrayals, rewriting speeches she delivered years ago. The perfume around her begins to change as it warms on her skin. Sweetness turns metallic, roses give way to smoke. The air feels thoughtful, like it too, is unable to rest. Sometimes in those sleepless hours she walks, barefoot, silent, ghost-like. The attendants pretend not to see her, because acknowledging insomnia in a monarch feels indecent. She moves through the corridors like her own apparition, a pale figure in white linen trailing the faint smell of opium and ambergris. She pauses by a window overlooking the Thames. The river moves slowly in the moonlight, black and steady. The scent of water and city smoke drifts upward. For a moment she breathes it in, a reminder of the world outside her perfumes. Damp, ordinary, alive. Then she turns away. Once, she told a courtier, a queen cannot sleep soundly. The crown weighs too much upon the pillow. He laughed politely. She didn't. The laundress, who cleans the sheets each morning, finds them stained with faint traces of red and gold, remnants of powder and sweat. She shakes her head. Even in dreams, she says softly, she's working. Then she folds the linens, perfumes them again, and the cycle begins anew. The perfumer now spends most nights mixing comforting airs, small vials of herbs and oils meant to soothe Her Majesty's rest. He names them with desperate optimism: quiet heart, still mind, sleep eternal. He delivers them one by one, each labelled in his careful hand. The Queen accepts them all, tries them all, and sleeps through none. She dreams when she doesn't want to. The medicines pull her halfway into strange worlds, corridors filled with mirrors, endless reflections of her own painted face staring back. Sometimes she hears music. Sometimes she hears her mother's voice, faint and soft, asking if she's tired yet. She always wakes before she can answer. The court has learned to speak softly after midnight. No one slams doors. No one laughs. The palace holds its breath out of respect for its sleepless queen. Even the candles seem to flicker more quietly. By dawn she rises, pale and calm as though nothing happened. The attendants marvel at her composure. They think it's discipline, it's exhaustion refined into elegance. Her eyes are ringed faintly with grey, but the makeup will fix that. Her perfume will disguise the fatigue. The illusion will continue as it always does. You notice how the air around her changes over time. The scent of her chambers grows heavier, less floral, more medicinal. Once it smelled like gardens, now it smells like survival. At breakfast she takes small bites of sugared fruit, sipping watered wine. A physician offers her a vial of syrup of poppies for gentle calm. She nods, accepts it, and dips her finger into the liquid, tasting the faint bitterness beneath the honey. The perfumer, ever loyal, asks softly if the scent helps her sleep. She smiles, distant. It helps the air sleep, she says, and maybe that's enough. As the morning progresses, the palace stirs again. Footsteps echo, servants whisper, candles are relit. The scent of the Queen's restless night dissolves slowly into the day's routine. Fresh flowers replace burnt incense. The illusion of vitality returns, but something lingers. The faint sweetness of poppies hides in the curtains, in the folds of her gown, in the air itself. Even when she laughs in council or greets foreign envoys, the smell is there. Gentle, narcotic, mournful. Perfume has become anesthesia for the soul. At night, it will begin again. The doctors will measure new doses. The perfumer will prepare another vial. The attendants will close the curtains and whisper reassurance, and the Queen will lie awake, breathing through her own legend, waiting for the silence to forgive her. Because in Whitehall, even dreams have been perfumed, and when sleep finally comes, it smells faintly of fear. By now, the Queen's reflection has become her most loyal courtier. It listens, never interrupts, and always agrees that she looks divine. She begins each morning facing the mirror in silence, as if negotiating with the past. The mask of white paint, the curls of perfumed hair, the pearls, the calm, all assembled once again. Around her, attendants whisper and move, their faces blurred in the mirror's edge. The Queen studies her own, searching for the woman she used to be. She rarely finds her. Cleanliness here has long stopped meaning purity. It means control, the ability to erase evidence of time. Every scented towel, every rosewater rinse, every polished surface is a small rehearsal of authority. The air in her chamber smells freshly awakened. Rose, clove, vinegar, and something else. Faint, metallic, patient. Beneath the sweetness, a trace of fatigue lingers, but no one speaks of it. In the court of appearances, exhaustion is a kind of treason. The perfumer kneels beside her, offering a small bottle of new blend. "For brightness," he murmurs, voice cracking. The Queen accepts, dabs it behind her ears and nods. She doesn't ask what's in it. By now, ingredients are irrelevant. All that matters is the illusion it carries. Outside, the courtiers are already performing their own cleanliness. The air along the corridors smells of starch, smoke, and ambition. You watch as a nobleman sprinkles rosewater on his sleeves before bowing to a portrait. A maid polishes the floor with vinegar and muttered prayers. The perfume has become a religion without scripture. Each person here fights decay with fragrance, an endless battle between mortality and etiquette. The palace is immaculate, but it never feels fresh. Cleanliness has become its own kind of dust, invisible, constant, and quietly suffocating. At council meetings, the Queen's face glows under the leaden powder. Every movement is deliberate, every pause curated. When she speaks, the air itself seems to listen. Her voice is calm, melodic, perfectly steady. The tone of someone who has learned that serenity, repeated often enough, can pass for truth. The courtiers breathe her in like air after rain. They copy her gestures, her patience, her restraint. You can see how much effort it takes them to remain still, to keep their own cracks hidden beneath perfume and propriety. The entire room feels polished to a dangerous shine. During one meeting, an advisor faints. Too much heat, too little air. The Queen doesn't move. Servants rush forward with vinegar-soaked cloths, waving them like banners of medical faith. The man revives, pale and grateful. "The scent of health," someone murmurs. The Queen smiles faintly, a woman who knows how fragile health and hierarchy truly are. Later, she retreats to her private room, her footsteps soft against the rushes. The laundress stands ready with clean linens, her hands red from work. The Queen nods to her in passing, a rare acknowledgement. The woman curtsies deeply, her apron smelling of soap and humanity. For one quiet moment, the two worlds, perfumed and practical, share the same air. Then the Queen moves on. At her dressing table, the mirror waits again. She looks older tonight, though the light may be to blame. The candle trembles, the reflection ripples. She smooths powder over her temples as if softening the thought of time. Her attendants bring a basin of rosewater for the evening ritual. She dips her fingers in, touches her face gently. The water cools her skin, lifting a faint trace of paint. The gesture is almost tender, like forgiveness practiced through habit. "Enough for tonight," she says softly. But they keep fussing, as if her face were a clock that might stop if they didn't maintain it. When they finally leave, the room settles into silence. The Queen stays by the mirror. She leans forward, inhaling the faint scent of roses clinging to her skin. There is something desperate in the way she breathes, as though she's trying to memorize herself. Outside, the river groans under the weight of the city. The wind slips through the cracks of the palace, bringing the faintest smell of smoke and rain. It cuts through the perfume like honesty through politeness. The Queen closes her eyes. For a second, she allows herself to breathe it. Real air, unscented, alive. Then she exhales, slowly, as if erasing the moment. She understands, perhaps better than anyone, that the appearance of purity is more useful than purity itself. The kingdom doesn't need truth, it needs composure. Her life has been one long act of staying immaculate while everything else falls apart. The perfumer, waiting outside her door, listens for her bell. It doesn't ring. He relaxes, coughs into his sleeve, and looks at the small vial in his hand. The leftover blend. He thinks of throwing it away, but he knows he won't. Perfection, even when it fails, demands another attempt. Somewhere in the lower hall, servants scrub at marble floors stained faintly from last night's banquet. The smell of vinegar rises again. Upstairs, the Queen's attendants air out her gowns, replacing the sachets of herbs in the seams. By morning, the palace will smell new again, as though decay were just a rumour. Cleanliness has become performance, not to deceive others, but to protect the self from knowing too much. When dawn finally arrives, the Queen stands once more before her mirror. She looks at her reflection and whispers, "Still sovereign." The mirror, as always, agrees, and yet, as she turns away, the faintest trace of dust remains on the surface, the only thing in Whitehall that doesn't know how to lie. Centuries later, the air above the Thames still remembers. The river moves differently where the palace once stood, curling as if reluctant to leave. The stones that remain, blackened, eroded, half buried, carry a scent when it rains, damp plaster, candle wax and the faintest memory of roses. Whitehall is gone, but it didn't vanish. It evaporated, slowly, like perfume. You stand where the great hall used to be, and the wind brings ghosts that aren't shaped like people, but like smells. A trace of smoke from ancient candles, a whisper of lavender where no garden grows, a sweetness that could be sugar or decay. The city has changed, but air is loyal. It remembers who ruled it once. There are no portraits here anymore, only the imagination to fill the gaps. You picture her walking through this space, the pale skin painted into divinity, the rustle of fabric that could start a fire, the aura of perfume that arrived before her words. She was the scent of control, and now she's the silence after it. The historians write of her intelligence, her policies, her speeches. They note the triumphs and the scandals, the victories and the storms. But what they never write is how it smelled to be there. How power was not a sound or a colour, but an air so thick with fragrance that truth had to hold its breath. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it again. The slow hiss of burning herbs, the murmur of servants walking on rush-strewn floors, the faint cough of the perfumer somewhere in the background, the rhythm of an empire held together by ceremony and scent. Whitehall, in its glory, was a palace of denial built on foundations of mud. When the floods came, the walls darkened. When the candles burned low, the perfume clung to the smoke like habit. And when the Queen died, the air, faithful to the end, kept her company. Some say that after her passing, her chambers were sealed. The attendants couldn't bear to wash them. The rosewater bowls dried, the linen stiffened, but the scent remained. Faint, but stubborn. For years, visitors claimed they could smell her still. Amber, civet, and the quiet weight of exhaustion. It's fitting, in a way. She ruled by fragrance, and so fragrance became her ghost. When you think of her now, it isn't the portraits that come to mind. It's the air, the invisible monument. You imagine the laundress, long gone, standing at the riverbank years later, sniffing the wind and muttering, "I'll still her." You imagine the perfumer's empty workshop, bottles still glowing faintly in the dust. You imagine the palace sinking gracefully into its own reflection. The scent of her life, roses and denial, seeps into modernity. We burn candles that promise purity. We spray rooms with freshness. We bathe in fragrances named after cleanliness itself, forgetting that once such smells were only disguises. The names have changed, but the need remains. We still perfume what we can't control. We still polish the mirror until it lies politely. We still hide behind the illusion that scent can make decay behave. In that sense, she never left. She simply evolved into habit. You look around. The modern air carries its own masks, diesel and perfume, rain and detergent, smoke and soap. A city's blend of progress and denial. Somewhere beneath it all, the same logic hums. If it smells right, it must be fine. Perhaps that's why history feels familiar. Every age invents its own fragrance of virtue. The Queen had rosewater. We have air fresheners, different bottles, same hope. If the past could speak, it would likely smell before it said anything. It would ask, "What are you trying to cover?" You breathe in deeply. The wind shifts, carrying something gentle. Warm stone, distant flowers, the phantom of incense. It isn't haunting, it's forgiving. Like time finally exhaling. You think of her again, not as a monarch or a myth, but as a person who lived surrounded by scent until even her silence smelled expensive, who slept beside the perfume of her own creation, who spent a lifetime convincing herself that purity could be painted, and that pain, if it smelled of roses, didn't count. She ruled a world where perfume replaced truth, and somehow it worked, for a while. Then the drains rose, the fire came, and the empire learned what every candle eventually learns. Burning brightly is just another way of disappearing. And yet, something lingered. Not the silk, not the stone, not the crown, but the air, the loyal servant of memory. It drifts still through time, softer now, quieter, wiser. You take one last breath. The faint sweetness of age meets the coolness of night, and you understand that history doesn't end. It fades like perfume, leaving warmth in the air and questions on the skin. She ruled by fragrance. We rule by freshness. The names have changed, but the scent remains familiar. And that, somehow, is how it all made sense back then.